Hello there, everyone, and welcome to the wild, weird, and wacky world of the Word. Yes, I'm out in my barn again because it's a lot quieter here than it is inside the house right now. So that's why we're going to be going over our wild and weird stuff that we find in the Gospel of Mark. Yep, it's what we got in our Gospel reading. I'm just going to read part of it. Now, Jesus has just told his disciples that if your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. And if your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off. If your eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out. Why? It's because it's better to enter into life either maimed or lame or partly blind than to go to hell and have all your wits and eyes and feet and hands about you. Now, listen to this very last part of it. And this is, I'm starting with the eye part. If your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. It's better for you to enter the kingdom of God with one eye than with two eyes and be thrown into hell, where their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. Yikes! Now, the word for hell here is Gehenna. And what's important about that? Well, Gehenna was the place where, in Jewish history, child sacrifices had been taking place. The pagan cultures had done it there, and there were some of the kings of Israel got caught up in that same thing. Just a very, very, very bad time in their history. So, in Jewish literature, well, let's talk about it. Let's do it. Let's go to Isaiah, the very last chapter, chapter 66, the very last verses. Just before this, the prophet's talking about the new heaven and the new earth that God's going to be establishing, and everything's going to be put right again. And he talks about all flesh coming to worship the Lord. And then this happens. And they shall go forth and look on the dead bodies of the men that have rebelled against me, meaning Yahweh. For their worms shall not die, their fire shall not be quenched, and they shall be an abhorrence to all flesh. That, the last words in the book of Isaiah. Interesting, isn't it? But there's also another book of the Bible that contains words very similar to this, and that is the book of Judith. Now, you might say, the book of Judith? What's that? Well, it's in the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha are a group of books that are intertestamental books, meaning they were written between the time of the Older Testament and the New Testament books. They're also called deuterocanonical books by the Jewish people who accept these books as part of their scriptures. The Catholic Church does as well. It's called the Apocryphal books. In the Protestant ranks, a lot of our Bibles don't even have them in there, but if you have a good one, you'll find it in there too. Martin Luther read these works and used them in his studies. They're very good for helping us to understand what was going on in the time, especially just before Jesus and even during the time of Jesus, especially what was in the mindset of the people and their faith life and the theology that they espoused at that time. Now, reading from the book of Judith, again, this is the very last chapter of the book, it's chapter 16, and look here at verse 17, almost at the very end of the chapter. Woe to the nations that rise up against my people. The Lord Almighty will take vengeance on them in the day of judgment. Fire and worms will he give to their flesh, and they shall weep in pain forever. So what's the idea of reading from Isaiah and from this book of Judith? Well, the idea is it was in the mindset of the people that on the day of judgment, some awful things were going to happen to those who had rebelled against God and had turned their back on God or had fought against God. Anyone who was against God, Yahweh, there was some bad stuff going to happen to them. They're going to be eaten up by worms and be thrown into this fire that never goes out. Ah, yikes. Well, since I mentioned the book of Judith, maybe this is a good time to talk about it, because in the Jewish ranks, they love this book. It's a book that talks about being faithful right to the bitter end in the face of adversity that looks like you have no chance. It almost sounds a little bit like the book of Esther, but it's a little bit different in that Judith, she ends up almost in a sense being a lot more faithful and a lot more forceful. Well, just in a nutshell, this is what the book is about. It was written in about the 2nd century BCE, at a time when the people were being persecuted by the Greeks in the Greek Empire. But it's set back in the time of Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire. And Nebuchadnezzar had battled against the Medes and defeated them, but he was kind of ticked off at all the nations to his west that he had already defeated, and had formed this coalition and called upon the people to help out whenever he was going around defeating his other enemies. Well, excuse me, what happened was a lot of people, including the Jewish people, didn't join in on the fun. So now Nebuchadnezzar is going to get even with him, sends out one of his generals. This general has the Jewish people in a small town surrounded, and he's just going to wait them out, just starve them out, right? Well, the people basically had given up. They're going to kill us. But Judith, who is a widow at this time, stands up and gives this awesome speech, rallies the troops, and then she does this weird thing where she leaves the town, takes her handmaiden with her, and they go right to this foreign general's encampment. And to make a long story short, she kind of puts the moves on him and sort of seduces him, but at the very least, she gets him in his good graces at this point. And this general, he's being a bit of a gentleman to her, but man, he has eyes for her. So one night she gets him drunk. They have this lavish party. He gets drunk, and she then puts the moves on again. He invites her back to his tent where they're all alone. But he's so drunk, he passes out. And what does she do? There's a sword at the foot of his bed. She picks up that sword. Now, she's not all that strong. It took 2 hacks to do it, but she hacked off his head. And this is a story in the Bible that the people are celebrating. They're celebrating that God has rescued them from their enemies again by having this Judith, this awesome widow lady, rise up and rally the troops and cut off the head of this foreign general who was basically starving them all to death. Well, this is what she does. She takes his head, sticks it in her duffel bag, so to speak, with her handmaiden, and they just gently walk back home to the village. And she calls everyone in there and shows them this head, and they're all going crazy, like, whoa, how in the world did you do that? And then they take this general's head and put it on the wall of the city, and at daybreak, all the people are looking for their general. They can't find him. They find him. They just find his body, not his head. And they freak out, start running away. The Jewish troops are rallied up and encouraged, and they go out, and it's just a mass slaughter. And this is a book that is celebrates God leading them in victory over their enemies. And that's why it ends the way it does, as it also does in the book of Isaiah, that anyone who opposes God and tries to do this to his people, what's going to happen to them? Worms. They're going to be eaten by worms. Worms that just go munch, munch, munch forever and ever and be burned up in fire. Fire that never ends. Yep, that's one of the books of the Apocrypha that celebrate did I say loving God? No. Well, yeah, a God who cared for his people, but in a rather strange way. But there we go. And why do we have that? Because the Bible is so wild, weird, and wacky. But in the end, it is his word. And this is a word that is read in the Catholic Church, in much of Eastern, other Christian circles also have this book in their Bibles, and it's in the Jewish scriptures as well, because it's all a part about how the people experienced God leading them and rescuing them once again from a very difficult situation because of the faithfulness of one person, a person named Judith. Well, go out and enjoy your day now, but just keep the swords in their place, okay? God's blessings be with you.